Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at something a little different.
Yeah, this one's pretty cool.
Yeah, we've got excerpts from a fantasy story. It's called Carly the Eye.
An
And
update rundown.
yeah, a weekly rundown for the author, Karen Eastland.
So we've got both, kind of like the finished product and a little bit of the behind the scenes of the creative process that went into making it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like she's giving us a guided tour of her imagination. Have you ever wondered where writers get their ideas? Well, today's deep dive might just give you a little glimpse into that mysterious process.
Yeah, it's like we're watching the magic happen.
All right, so let's jump right into Carly the Eye. The excerpt kind of throws us right into the middle of the action.
Okay.
Millie and Sandra are trapped in this magical cell.
Right.
They're being held captive by Sam, who is using stolen magic.
And the source of that stolen magic?
Yeah.
From a hobgoblin? No, wait. A demon.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It kind of suggests that there's this bigger power struggle happening, like behind the scenes, maybe even a clash between different magical factions.
Totally. It's like we're getting these little hints of a much larger world beyond this immediate conflict. And then there's Garden.
Yeah.
It's this mischievous goblin who's helping Millie.
Right.
But we're never quite sure whose side he's really on or what his true motives are.
Yeah, there's a line that I think really kind of encapsulates this whole mystery surrounding Garden. When Millie asks him how he does something, he replies, "It's not something I say, it's something I do."
Right.
Cryptic.
Yeah. Like he's operating on a completely different plane of existence. Like actions speak louder than words, so to speak. And speaking of cryptic, let's talk about the eye.
Yes.
This entity that communicates with Millie and seems to be guiding her.
Right.
But in a very ambiguous way, almost manipulative.
Yeah, the eye's advice, it's constantly shifting, sometimes helpful, sometimes honestly downright dangerous. It leaves Millie and us as the reader kind of questioning its true intentions, like who or what can we really trust here?
Here's this one part, Millie starts to question the eye's motives, thinking, convenient, she suspected the eye was avoiding the truth. Like, you can really feel that tension building. Like, she's starting to realize she can't fully rely on this entity.
Yeah, it's a classic dilemma, trusting your own intuition versus relying on external guidance.
Right.
Especially when that guidance is coming from a source that might have, like, hidden agendas.
Exactly. And then we get to this pivotal scene. Millie channels the power of these ancient bones, purging this malevolent entity. Ruby merges with her hand, and we finally see the eye's true form revealed as Carly. What a reveal.
Yeah, it's this powerful moment of transformation, both for Millie and for the story itself. And what I think is really fascinating is that this moment of revelation in the story, it seems to mirror Karen's own experience as a writer. She talks about in her weekly rundown being a discovery writer, saying, "It's the bonus of being a discovery writer. I'm as surprised to see what happens next as if I too am reading it for the first time."
So you're saying that Millie's discovery of Carly is like Karen's discovery of the story as she writes it. That's really cool.
Exactly.
It's almost like the line between fiction and reality is blurring. Like Karen's tapping into this deeper creative force that's guiding both her and her characters.
And this brings us to this theme of intuition,
Okay.
which seems to be at the heart of both Millie's magical journey and Karen's creative process.
Okay, let's unpack this a little further. How do we see this theme of intuition playing out specifically?
Okay, well, on Millie's side, she's constantly having to make these split-second decisions based on, like, incomplete information.
Right.
She's got to trust her gut, even when it goes against what the eye is telling her.
Yeah.
And on Karen's side, she talks about this feeling of the story unfolding organically, letting her instincts guide her rather than forcing a pre-planned outline.
So both Millie and Karen are embracing the unknown, taking risks, and trusting their inner compass to lead them in the right direction. But how does Karen actually, do that in practice? I mean, are there, specific tools or techniques that help her tap into that intuitive flow?
That's where it gets even more interesting. Remember how she mentioned using those songwriting tools, Udio and Suno?
Yeah, she talked about using them to, refine her lyrics and find the perfect sound.
Right, but I think they represent something much deeper. She talks about using Udio to find the natural chorus, almost like it was already there, waiting to be discovered.
Wait, hold on. So you're saying she's using technology to actually enhance her intuition?
Exactly.
It's like these tools are helping her access a deeper level of creative awareness.
Like she's using technology to tune in to the frequency of her own creativity, much like Millie's using spells and rituals to manipulate magical energies.
That's wild. It makes you wonder how much of Karen's own creative process is reflected in Millie's magical journey. Are they more similar than we realize?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. And the more we look at Karen's work, the more those parallels become apparent. She's not just a writer, she's also a songwriter and a mixed media artist.
Oh, yeah. It's like she's got all these different creative outlets and they're all feeding into each other, creating this really rich tapestry of expression.
Exactly. And what's really striking is that she approaches each medium with this same sense of exploration and playfulness that we see in Millie's magical experiments.
Yeah. She even mentions in her weekly rundown that she released her new song, Will You Remember Me, earlier than planned because she was just so happy with how it turned out. It's like she's letting that creative energy lead the way, just like Millie follows her intuition into uncharted territory.
Yeah, speaking of that creative energy, let's go back to those songwriting tools Karen uses, Udio and Suno.
Yeah, what's the deal with those? They sound pretty high tech.
Well, on the surface, they're just tools for refining lyrics and experimenting with different sounds, but I think they represent something much deeper. Karen talks about using Udio to find the natural chorus within a song, like as if the song already exists in some unseen realm, and she's just using the tool to bring it into being.
Whoa, that's kind of spoopy. But also really cool. It's like she's channeling the music, almost like Millie channeling magical energy through those spells and incantations.
Exactly, and that's where things get really interesting. If we see those tools as metaphors for the way Karen taps into her own creative intuition, it makes you wonder, are Millie's spells and rituals also metaphors for the writer's process?
Okay, I'm following you. So you're saying that Millie's struggles to master her magic, that might actually reflect Karen's own struggles to master her craft as a writer.
Exactly. And that struggle, it's something that we can all relate to, whether we're artists or entrepreneurs or just trying to navigate, life. We all have those moments where we feel lost, unsure, like fumbling around in the dark.
Totally. It's like we're all on this quest to find our own unique power, our own voice, our own way of making sense of the world. And sometimes, yeah, the path isn't clear and we have to rely on our instincts to guide us.
And just like Millie learns to trust her intuition, even when it conflicts with what the eye is telling her, we have to learn to trust our own inner compass, even when it leads us in directions that we weren't expecting.
So are you saying that by reading Carly the Eye, we're actually learning about more than just like magic and fantasy? We're learning about the creative process, about the power of intuition, about the importance of trusting our own inner voice.
That's exactly what I'm saying. I think that's one of the most powerful things about stories like this. They transport us to these fantastical worlds, but they also, hold up this mirror to our own lives, to our own struggles, our own triumphs.
It's like we're seeing ourselves reflected in these characters, and through their journey, we're learning something valuable about ourselves.
And that brings us back to that initial question. How much of Karen's own creative process is reflected in Millie's magical journey? I think the answer is a lot more than we might realize at first glance.
So if Millie's journey is a metaphor for the creative process, what can we learn from her struggles and her triumphs? What insights can we take away from her experiences that might help us, in our own creative endeavors or even just in our everyday lives?
Well, one of the most important lessons, I think, is the importance of embracing uncertainty.
Right. Millie's constantly being thrown into these situations where she doesn't have all the answers. She has to make decisions on the fly. And she has to trust that she'll figure it out as she goes.
And that's so true for us in the real world, too, right? We're bombarded with information, choices, pressure. It's easy to feel overwhelmed and freeze up and doubt ourselves. But Millie's story, it reminds us that sometimes the best way forward is just to take a leap of faith and trust that we'll, find our footing along the way.
Yeah, that's such an important message, especially, today where everything feels so fast-paced and uncertain. It's easy to get caught up in, the need for control, for like a perfect plan. But sometimes the most creative, the most fulfilling path is the one that unfolds organically in response to the challenges and opportunities that life throws our way.
And that brings us to another key takeaway, the power of embracing failure.
Whoa, hold on. Failure, that's not exactly a word we usually associate with like creativity and success.
I know, right? But think about it. Millie doesn't always succeed. She makes mistakes. She misjudges situations. Sometimes she trusts the wrong people. But she never lets those setbacks define her. She learns from them. She adapts. She keeps moving forward.
Yeah, you know what? I see your point. It's like those failures are actually essential parts of her growth. They force her to reevaluate her assumptions, try new approaches, become more resourceful and resilient.
Exactly. And that's true for us, for all of us. If we're afraid to fail, if we're too attached to being right all the time, we're actually limiting our own potential for growth and creativity.
So how do we apply this to our own lives? How do we embrace failure without, letting it crush our spirits?
That's where things get really personal, I think,
Yeah.
because the answer is going to be different for everyone. But I think it starts with shifting our perspective. Instead of seeing failure as like a sign of weakness, we can start to see it as this valuable learning opportunity, like a chance to course correct, refine our approach.
So it's not about avoiding failure, it's about learning to fail well.
Exactly. And that requires a certain amount of self-awareness, a willingness to, be honest with ourselves about our strengths and weaknesses, and a commitment to continuous learning and improvement.
It's like we're all works in progress, constantly evolving and refining our skills and our understanding of the world.
And that process of evolution, of becoming, it's beautifully reflected in Millie's journey and in Karen's own creative process.
Like they're both on this parallel path of discovery, pushing beyond their comfort zones, embracing the unknown, and trusting their intuition to guide them towards their full potential.
And that, I think, is one of the most inspiring messages that we can take away from this deep dive.
It's like Karen's showing us that creativity, it isn't just about talent or skill, it's about courage, resilience, and a willingness to embrace the messiness and the uncertainty of that creative process.
And most importantly, I think, it's about recognizing that that creative journey, it's not a destination, it's a lifelong adventure.
All right, so we've talked a lot about Karen's creative process and how that's reflected in Millie's journey. But what about the story itself? What's the bigger message, the deeper meaning that Karen's trying to convey through Carly the Eye?
Ah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I think, there are many layers to unpack. But one thing that stands out to me is this idea of duality, the interconnectedness of light and shadow, good and evil.
Yeah, I see that. Millie's constantly grappling with those opposing forces, both within herself and in the world around her. She's got to learn to balance her own inner darkness and light to navigate a world where good and evil are often intertwined, in really complex and unexpected ways.
Exactly. And that's something, we all face in our own lives. We all have our own internal struggles, our own shadows to contend with. And the world is full of complexities and contradictions, where things aren't always black and white, good or bad.
So how does Millie navigate that? What strategies does she use to deal with these opposing forces?
Well, one thing that strikes me is her willingness to confront her fears. She doesn't shy away from the darkness, the danger, the unknown.
Right. She's constantly pushing herself beyond her comfort zone, facing down challenges that would make, most people run and hide.
And that courage, that willingness to face the darkness is ultimately what allows her to find her own strength, her own power, her own light.
So it's not about denying the darkness, it's about learning to integrate it, to make it work for us rather than against us.
Exactly. And that's a powerful message, I think. It's about finding that balance, that harmony between those opposing forces, both within ourselves and the world around us.
Okay, so this is all pretty deep stuff. But how does it connect back to Karen's creative process? How does this theme of duality, of light and shadow, play out in her own work?
That's where it gets really fascinating. Remember how Karen talked about using audio to find that natural chorus within a song?
Yeah, she said it's like the song already exists in some unseen realm.
Right. And I think that's a beautiful metaphor for the creative process itself. The song, the story, the artwork, it's all there, waiting to be discovered. But it's not just pure light, pure inspiration. There's also darkness, doubt, uncertainty, all those things that we, as creators have to grapple with.
So the creative process is like this dance between light and shadow, this process of bringing those opposing forces into harmony to create something new and beautiful.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the most profound insights that Karen is sharing with us through Carly the Eye. She's showing us that the creative journey is not about perfection. It's about embracing the messiness, the contradictions, the full spectrum of human experience, both light and dark.
It's about finding beauty in the imperfections,
Yeah.
strength in our vulnerabilities, wisdom in our mistakes.
Exactly. And that's a message that really resonates with me. I think it'll resonate with our listeners as well.
So what does all of this mean for, for us? How can we apply this understanding of duality, of light and shadow to our own lives?
That's a great question. I think that's something that each listener is going to have to discover for themselves. But maybe a good place to start is by simply acknowledging those shadows, those parts of ourselves that we tend to, hide or deny. Often, it's our fear of those shadow aspects that gives them power over us.
Right.
But when we bring them into the light of awareness, when we acknowledge them with compassion and curiosity, they can actually become sources of strength and creativity.
So it's not about erasing those darker parts of ourselves. It's about integrating them into our whole being, seeing them as part of what makes us, unique and complex.
Exactly. It's like in Carly the Eye, Millie doesn't try to, eliminate her shadow side. She learns to harness it,
Hmm.
to use it as a source of power and resilience.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this all ties together now. The story, Karen's process, and even our own lives, they're all about embracing this duality, this dance between light and shadow.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the most profound gifts that Karen offers us through her work. She invites us to explore those deeper aspects of ourselves, to find beauty in the imperfections, and to embrace the full spectrum of human
It's
experience.
like she's giving us permission to be fully ourselves, shadows and all.
And in doing so, she's empowering us to tap into a deeper well of creativity, to find our own unique voice, and to create work that is both authentic and meaningful.
So how does this understanding change the way we experience stories?
Well, for one thing, I think it allows us to appreciate the complexity of characters and narratives. We can move beyond, those simplistic notions of good versus evil and recognize that nuanced interplay of light and shadow within each character, within each story.
It's like we're developing a more sophisticated lens for viewing the world, both the fictional and the real.
Exactly. And that deeper understanding, it can enrich our lives in countless ways. It can make us more compassionate, more forgiving, more accepting of ourselves and others.
Wow. That's pretty powerful stuff. So what's the one thing that you hope our listeners take away from this deep dive?
I think the most important takeaway is this. Don't be afraid to embrace the unknown, both in your creative endeavors and in your life. Trust your intuition, even when it leads you in unexpected directions. And remember, the creative journey, it's not about perfection. It's about embracing the messiness, the challenges, the full spectrum of human experience.
That's a great message to end on. And who knows, maybe this deep dive will inspire some of our listeners to tap into their own creative potential, to explore those hidden depths within themselves, and to bring their own unique vision to the world.
I certainly hope so. The world needs more stories, more art, more expressions of the human spirit in all its beautiful complexity. And who knows, maybe those stories will inspire others to do the same.
It's like this ripple effect of creativity, spreading outwards and transforming the world, one story, one song, one artwork at a time.
That's a beautiful thought to leave our listeners with.
This deep dive into Karen Eastland's work has been truly inspiring. I hope you've enjoyed exploring the connections between her creative process, the story of Carly the Eye, and those deeper themes of intuition, duality, and embracing the unknown. If you're interested in learning more about Karen's work, be sure to check out the links in the show notes. And until next time, keep diving deep.